Hey, welcome to the Liberal Buzz Show. And we're back and we're mad. We're mad about voting. And Microsoft basically, some techies having a huge influence at City Hall over our election software, which is antiquated, and the Russians hacked it really easily. So, and who knows who else is compromising it? Because I know I wasn't on the voter rolls in June of 2016. So, and a bunch of people in front of me at the precinct weren't on the voter rolls either. So my guest today, he might be calling, Brent Turner, might be calling in. He's in a movie called The Real Activist. That's a movie being made about him. He is the Real Activist. TheRealActivistMovie.com is where is the name of the website where his movie trailer can be seen. And so, and his news about the issues for open source voting can be found here on his website at navo-us.org. So today, Brent Turner and a bunch of activists that have cars and can go to Sacramento went and gave public comment in Sacramento today. So there's Brent with Eric Swalwell, Congressman Eric Swalwell. He takes a lot of selfies with a lot of Congress people and lawmakers. So they packed the Senate Budget Committee. So he's going to give us an update because open source paper ballot systems to replace corporate systems that are insecure and easily hacked into. And locally, Supervisor Malia Cohen pledged $4 million in San Francisco, and that's not really a binding solution. And despite a call for open source, San Francisco had $30 million for software from Microsoft instead. So they're $30 million for Microsoft products, even though they've been told not to. And the techies need to pull their heads in a little bit about this, like I said earlier. Yeah. Some of them are. Some of them are getting on board with it. So there's Brent. Brent Turner. This is Brent Turner. How you doing, Brent?
Good. How are you, Denise?
Pretty good. And this is Brent Turner. He's going to be in the Real Activist movie. There's a movie being made about him specifically. And he paid you today. So what happened at the Senate Budget Committee hearing to get our software financed?
Well, today's hearing was more informational than them making a hard decision. That's going to happen in the next few weeks. So today we had about 25 activists showing up in front of the Senate Budget Committee to make the case that they should match San Francisco in moving forward with the open source project for voting systems. So basically, San Francisco is considering putting $4 million in the bucket.
That was by Malia Cohen, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and what's Mark Farrell's problem? Why doesn't he want to take any money from the state?
I don't know that that's exactly the case. I don't want to speak for him or about him until we get a final decision, because I think everybody's mulling it over. But when I've had conversation in the past with his office, they seem to understand that we have to have proper voting systems, and this is the less expensive way to obtain that necessary security.
Yeah, it's not just the voting system; it's the infrastructure, NASA.
Well, everybody with mission critical operations is aware of open source within government. We're coaching the DHS right now trying to get them up to speed. We don't know exactly where their heads are at, if they're just affected by the business interests, and we're hoping that's not the case, but DHS is a little slow to come to the party.
Right.
As you mentioned, NASA and the DOD and the Air Force, they're already utilizing open source for their mission critical operations. So we think naturally that voting is mission critical.
Well, how can we get a uniform policy in the United States? Do we need a? I mean, not all states have voter initiatives, you know, do they?
Well, we're going state by state. Ohio, interestingly, as Ohio and Florida are famous for their shoddy voting practices, Ohio is moving forward with the certification of one of our board members, Dr. Juan Gilbert, famous for his work in New Hampshire, getting a voting system that is about 75% open source deployed in New Hampshire. He's been working in Ohio regarding the vote by mail system there. And so he has an open source application for vote by mail that is obtaining certification in Ohio. So that's a state that's showing some promise. As I mentioned, New Hampshire has already moved forward with open source systems, but the big kahuna is California. If we can get California to move forward with proper voting systems, that would be the trendsetter for the country. And just to recap, even though I know, Denise, you're smart on this, just for your audience, when we talk about open source software or public software, that is the alternative to what we currently use in the United States for software that runs the voting systems, which is a private, secret, hidden code that we're not allowed to see. So as civil rights activists, we always push for transparency in the systems. Some people might say, well, gee, if it's open, doesn't that give the bad guys a head start if they did decide to manipulate? And the answer is no. The fact is, by having the transparency in the system, that allows you to have an appropriate defensive posture in that you can see the bugs if someone cracks your system, and you always assume the bad guys are going to gain entry. So by having public software, that allows you to defend against bugs that would otherwise just live in your system without detection. So I just wanted to give that little foundation.
How about the cameras on the tabulators? And on the hard, we're talking about the hardware now. The Diebold machines. What about? Let's talk briefly about the Diebold machines and the little camera. I was kind of fascinated by that.
Well, cameras are good. I always analogize that I've had a friend of mine who was a bartender in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And he always said, put 20 cameras on me and I'll still rob you blind.
Oh,
so the idea is cameras are good. There's dead spots and there's interesting affectations that can limit the effectiveness of a good camera operation. The fact is, cameras are good, but they're not a substitute. It's just the same as when we see Microsoft allied activists what we call faux activists.
Oh, yeah.
They always talk about paper ballots,
Yeah.
which are a good thing.
Oh, like Kamala Harris and the Secure Elections Act?
Correct. Whoever is coaching her, which we know who that is, that's verified voting, and verified voting crept up inside the CAP people, Center for American Progress, and they're coaching Kamala to say, if we just have robust audits and paper ballots, we don't need to focus on the software code. We can still ride along on the gravy train of proprietary software, and let's not rock that boat. Well, the reality is you cannot secure a system that has proprietary code. So rule number one is swap out the private secret code for a good, transparent, general public license, open source software. Then you start talking about upgrading surrounding procedures, making sure you have a robust audit, a paper ballot. But when you talk simply about these other items and leave out the software, then you know you're being con jobbed by usually what we've always assumed to be Microsoft shills as pretend activists. But now, of course, with all the outside interference stuff, we don't know who these folks are working for. It could be outside country interests or Microsoft or anybody. We don't really care. What we know is the science is there to make the system secure, and it's not being followed. And we feel like when the citizens of the United States find out that we could have secure elections, but corporate folks are blocking that science, I think the citizens are going to be very upset.
Oh, yeah, they want to be the gatekeepers. It's the gatekeeper thing. There's gatekeepers in other sectors, too. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, so Secretary of State Alex Padilla, he's speaking with a forked tongue, yes?
Alex may be beyond rehabilitation at this point. We hope not. Certainly he's had 4 years and done nothing. If he manages to do something, we're going to be happy and grateful. But at this point, of course, we're very guarded because it seems as though he is too close to the vendors to really accomplish this mission. Again, we don't know what motivates people to disregard the science of secure elections. Certainly it could be the very darkest of reasons, or it could be plain ignorance. We don't assume him ignorant, however. He is an MIT grad.
Yeah.
So, everybody has to grapple with that on their own, but certainly you know as much or more about this than anybody, because I know you've been following this story. I don't know when we first started talking about it, but we started working on this in 2000, and then I don't know when you first got interested in the subject, but I think you've been doing it now for almost 10 years.
Oh, no, not long enough. But what did you think about the KPIX story they did?
I'm not necessarily familiar. What was it about?
You were saying that KPIX did a story about open source, and I was just wondering. I know NBC turned your story into a commercial for Microsoft because they made it sound like Microsoft needs to make our elections more secure, and so because of course NBC is owned by them. Microsoft. So KPIX did a story, and I was just wondering if they did any better with your story. But if you haven't heard,
I'm not familiar with the KPIX piece. To respond to your NBC conclusion, yes, NBC was not perfect, but we did appreciate the attention, and they may come around to do more. We've been talking to Face the Nation and other shows. 60 Minutes. 60 Minutes did run a story on it. Maybe that's what you're talking about, because that's CBS, and it was a little light in the loafers for sure. They only covered the story to a degree, and they never really got into the grit of it, which right now, there's a story to be told here where the bodies are buried, how we got to this point of having such poorly secured elections in the United States, and the business interests that have really delayed the science.
I can imagine. It's been suppressed, and the medical community does the same thing.
Right.
Yeah. And so what's the current status on the July 16th Mayor and Board of Supervisors allocating $300,000 to the DOE, sorry. DOE.
Well, we're glad that they've gone in little steps. It's better than nothing, but now it's the day to get real with this. So we're hoping that the supervisors enforce their previous direction to the Department of Elections to go ahead with open source systems, lead the state, lead the country toward proper security, show everybody, as New Hampshire has, that this is a way to save 50% of your cost, which turns into millions and millions for the counties and billions for the state and the country, and also avoid that interference manipulation issue when it comes to elections. So we're hopeful. And this Sunday, actually, is the big kickoff at the Women's Building in the Mission on 18th Street. Is it 17th or 18th Street?
18th between Valencia and Guerrero.
Right. Everybody shows up. We're going to have all the mayoral candidates.
I'll be there.
Senators Weiner and Phil Ting will be there. David Chu. They're both proponents of this.
I'll take videos.
Everybody that is interested should be there and really show that we support San Francisco leading the country, as San Francisco should, to the high ground of proper election security and fiscal responsibility. Yes,
very much so. And so we have about a minute left. Now, our current voter system ends in December. The contract ends in December 2018. So what are the plans?
Okay. By the way, that event on Sunday at the Women's Building is at 2 p.m. But the plan is that we're going to spend, I don't know, $10 million leasing a Band-Aid system. We wanted to avoid that, and we could have used that $10 million to basically finance the build-out of the entire project that we need. But instead, the foot dragging has cost us another $10 million now. So we're just going to lease a system and be running a crappy system for the next election.
Oh, boy. So I could go to the voter precinct and my name might not be on the list again.
That's a registration issue. That should all be public and open sourced as well. That's a little different than the actual tabulation. But yes, it's bad. And as Churchill said, if you're going through hell, keep going. So we need to keep going.
Right. I agree. And now, how can people help? We can tell the mayor, the Board of Supervisors, and San Francisco's Committee on Information Technology, which is located in the basement. Is that right?
Contact the mayor, the supervisors, the assembly, the Secretary of State, anybody, all your elected leaders, and give them hell. Let them know we want publicly owned voting systems right now. Don't delay. And they can all take a look at Yes on Fair Elections is one website. The California Clean Money people have stepped in to help us, and our website is CAVO.
I've got it up on the monitor. So and the real fast, the Department of Election meetings is the third Wednesday of each month at 6 p.m. room 408 of SF City Hall. And thank you so much for your work, Brent. We'll have this up real soon.
Thank you very much, Denise.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
So that was great. Thanks, Brent. You rock. And he's a rocker, by the way.
Someone's got the dirt at their fingertips, they like to file. Someone with the access and the power leads to an end of journey. Secrets you can't hide, fortified, or so you're thinking. What's the step? Enter world, comes crashing downwards. Hey, hey, who's watching? Hey, hey, who's watching? Your defenses have come under fire. Hey, hey, who's watching? Hey, hey, who's watching? Your defenses have been nullified. Silent soldiers of a single war, locked in battle. Silent soldiers of a single war, locked in battle. Silent soldiers of a single war, locked in battle. Sacred, sacred war.
Devil play you! How did you get up here? Show yourself! That is unnecessary, but never fear. I'll stay near you.
Stop to take a second look. Silent soldiers of the single war, locked in battle. Silent soldiers of the single war, locked in battle. Silent soldiers of the single war, locked in battle. Silent soldiers of the single war, locked in battle. Don't stop to take a second look. Don't step into the line of fire. The creeping upon you.